Hey, it's JW. This is Long and Winded. Thank you for tuning in. Here with my friend Will Kuros. You know him as AKA the Movie Man. By the backdrop, you can tell we're going to be doing a little Star Wars talk. Now, not much of a sci-fi fan. Know about Star Wars, Star Trek. Most of what I know, I've learned from Will. We're going to talk a little bit about it today. Star Wars is a big part of your life, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, my whole life essentially. I mean, it came out. The first one came out right before I was born. I was born in February '78, and the movie came out in May of '77. So, and then growing up through the early mid '80s, that was like the end all be all for sci-fi movies. I also liked Star Trek growing up, but that was more TV. There were movies, but the movies weren't as popular for Star Trek as the Star Wars movies were. And so, but yeah, Star Wars was huge for me growing up. And then a lot of my friends later on in life, like teenage and 20s and stuff like that, big part of everything. Yeah.
So you've seen the first one. Is that the one you've seen the most?
I mean, I did a long time ago. I did like mental math, trying to figure out like how many times I'd probably seen that movie. Yeah, between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, I had seen those movies quite a lot.
Put a number on it, roughly.
People would say it's impossible or unlikely, but it's probably in the hundreds, possibly thousands, because when I was a kid, with the old VHS tapes and everything like that, I would every Saturday and Sunday on the weekend when I wasn't in school, first thing I'd do when I wake up, pop in the VHS and watch Star Wars A New Hope, episode 4 A New Hope or whatever. And I did that for years. And then during summer vacation, like the 3 months of summer vacation, every day, first thing I do when I wake up, pop in Star Wars. I mean, I wore the tape out. Like I remember one day, like the tape got all like the image was fuzzy and everything was messed up, and I was like a little kid like freaking out like, oh, what's going on? And my mom comes in and she's like, you wore the tape out. And so I had to stop watching that part of the tape, and that's when I started watching Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi more, because that part of the tape wasn't all fuzzy. And then I got other copies of the tapes later, which I then subsequently wore those out too. So I mean, I did like quick, simple math, and then I used to fall asleep to the movies all the time. Like that was like the thing that I would always put on when I would crash out. I don't know if you want to necessarily count those as viewings, but yeah, I mean, it's easily in the hundreds that I've seen those movies, like high hundreds that I've seen the original trilogy.
And how many novels have you read?
Oh, I couldn't say. I mean, a fair amount.
20?
30? Yeah, maybe okay. 20. Some of them great, some of them not so great, and some of them horrible. It used to all be part of what Star Wars called the Expanded Universe. Now it's called Star Wars Legends. After Disney bought Star Wars, they made all of the old book stuff non-canon anymore, meaning it's not like what's going on in the universe anymore. They don't use that as a frame of real reference anymore. So that way Disney can make their own movies and not worry about like messing up stuff that, well, in this book it did this, and that, and there was this person, and now your movies contradict that. They was like, no, we're just gonna get rid of that stuff. Those books are still there. Obviously, you can go enjoy them if you want to, but they're no longer part of the main continuity anymore. Okay. So yeah.
Now you've told me privately, but that the Ewok Christmas special is by far your favorite.
Oh no, the Christmas special. I don't think there's Ewoks in there. There's Wookiees in there.
Oh,
it's the Christmas special. I think I've seen that from beginning to end once a long time ago. It's god awful. I mean, there's a reason why George Lucas tried to eliminate it from existence, because it's just it's almost unwatchable. Like, it's pretty bad.
So here's my thing about Star Wars. I say this with reverence, if possible. I find it a little overrated, because it seems like as much as people like it, the same people who like it and love it have so many complaints about so many different elements of it. And I don't know if that's just kind of fandom run amok, and so for me as the casual viewer who has watched most all of them, after the Jar Jar one, I didn't do the next two, or I guess the number 2 and number 3 by volume.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like there's always something that's happening with them that is upsetting people, which I don't hear, let's say, versus the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where people complain that there's too many girls in one scene or something like that, but it's stupid complaints that they have, as opposed to, it seems like there's some real issue that people have with certain elements of Star Wars that doesn't make it, I guess, as good as the lore is. Am I wrong about that, or?
Well, I wouldn't say it's overrated. I mean, it has its strengths and its weaknesses. It's not like it's not a perfect. The original trilogy is not perfect. The saga as a whole is far from perfect. What I think people run into over time, and I had this happen with a friend with the Lord of the Rings trilogy that Peter Jackson did back in the early 2000s. I think that's one of the best trilogies, if not the best cinematic trilogy ever made. I mean, there's the original Star Wars trilogy, which is great. There's the Godfather trilogy, which is great. Back to the Future's got a trilogy. But the thing with all those, with the exception of Lord of the Rings, those other trilogies all had one thing, where the running joke is always that the third movie is always disappointing.
Right.
Godfather 3 is horrible. Return of the Jedi is not horrible, but it's not as good as the first two movies. Back to the Future is kind of the same thing. It's fun. They're in the Old West, but the whole thing with the Back to the Future movies is that they basically remake the same movie 3 times in different time periods. It's almost the exact same stuff. But Lord of the Rings I thought was great. Now my point that I was going to make was I had a friend that she had never seen Lord of the Rings before. And I was like, oh, you gotta watch it. And she's like, I can't. I never want to. I'm like, why? I was like, it's a really well-made. I mean, even if you're not into like fantasy stuff, it's just a well-made series of movies. And the acting is great. All the talent is amazing. The special effects are top-notch. And she was like, my sister. And I was like, what do you mean your sister? My sister just wouldn't shut up about those movies when they were out. Like, it was just so overbearing that she had no desire to watch Lord of the Rings.
Like her sister just wouldn't stop talking about how great it was, that it just ruined it for her.
Her sister talked about how great it was so much that she was just like, I can't. I got her to watch it, and she acknowledged that cinematically they were great movies, but she was like, fantasy's not my thing. And yeah, even I was watching, I mean, they're long, which they are. She's like, fantasy's not my thing, they're long. But yeah, even when we were watching them, I just kept thinking of like my sister just talking them up for so much. And I was like, and I think that kind of translates to Star Wars. Why, like over the past 40 plus years, Star Wars has been like such a cultural impact that people talk about it so much that when you see people like, oh, I've never seen Star Wars, and you're like, do you think you're cool because you didn't see it? Right. And you're like, I'm talking about the things that everyone loves that I don't love, or is it just a matter of it's been talked about so much that I kind of don't want to see it because I hear about it so much anyway.
Like, have you seen Clueless? Sorry. Inside joke.
Inside joke. Yeah, I mean, with those movies, I some people might say they're overrated. It's possible. But I do think there's a lot of things that just culturally are very significant for those movies. I mean, they changed cinema, and for better or for worse, with the original trilogy. Not so much with the prequels or the sequel trilogies, but that original trilogy really was like a groundbreaking thing at the time.
I agree, and I think that that's one of the things that maybe, obviously there were other things before. What was the Stanley Kubrick one? 2001. What year was that?
That was 68, so that was almost 10 years before Star Wars.
Okay, so that was a big science fiction block. I don't know if it was a blockbuster, but as far as what it did,
I mean, it made money. Yes, 2001.
But it was revolutionary.
Yeah, it was revolutionary because, I mean, the special effects in that movie were amazing. The story was great. It was based on a great novel. The same year, 1968, was also the same year that the original Planet of the Apes came out with Charlton Heston.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is funny because a lot of things that people think about with Star Wars, like all the toys and how George Lucas made his money because he kept all the rights and I get all the merchandising, and back then the people were always like, merchandising, what was merchandising? Star Wars did make it big on that, but Star Wars wasn't the first movie that really did that. Planet of the Apes actually had a ton of merchandising. Like when I was like reading about that in college, talking about those movies, I mean, I only think that really in the original series, the first Planet of the Apes is the only one that's really good. The other ones kind of are not that great. But
Toby's a Mark Wahlberg.
God, that movie's horrible. But there were a lot of toys. There was toys, lunchboxes, all this stuff. And George Lucas did that with Star Wars to a greater degree. But I mean, that turned into a fiasco too, because then they didn't have enough toys for the demand. I mean, no one knew that Star Wars was going to blow up the way that it did. And when it did...
Well, Lucas, I mean, he gave back a lot of his directorial money in exchange for the...
So when he negotiated with 20th Century Fox about the original Star Wars, he took a lower director's fee in exchange for things like merchandising rights and having the rights to movies in general. And back then
they were happy to give that.
They were happy to give it. They're like,
right.
oh yeah, because back then a director usually just got paid an upfront fee, and they're like, oh, you want to do this for $1, and you want these mysterious like toy fees or whatever.
Right.
Cool,
Sure.
whatever,
Right.
sure. But then then the movie blows up. Every kid in the world or in America or whatever wants those toys, and they couldn't keep up with the demand. And then that went on for years. I mean, through Empire and Return of the Jedi, I mean, there was just tons of toys. I mean, I always wanted Star Wars toys when I was a kid.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there were multiple things that allowed him to make a ton of money. I mean, the man was worth, I don't know what he's worth now, but he was worth over $4 billion when he sold Star Wars to Disney already. I don't know what that equated to after the fact, but
so and I give him credit for that. There's a couple of things that just from the casual fan that I find, as far as you one of the things you had mentioned with the Lord of the Rings and why it was so good, and I agree, I liked all 3 of those. Sans the 12 endings of the third one,
Mm-hmm.
but I understand you have so much that you want to wrap up, and you want to pay you want to pay tribute to the novel,
Mm-hmm.
and so you kind of have to. But I think because all of those were filmed back to back to back,
yeah,
with the same director, the same vision, the same actors, everything, I think that's what made it good. Whereas even like in a later 7, 8, 9, where you have the Rian Johnson version, and then you had the J.J. Abrams version, and everything's kind of mixed up because they didn't have that. It's not the same person, the same vision. We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that firstly, it seemed that 4, 5, and 6, when they came out, and I know it was a story that George Lucas said he had 9 or 12. I think you told me a couple weeks ago when we were talking about doing this that you had heard that there was maybe even supposed to be like 12 stories or whatever, that they don't seem, even if you just look at 4, 5, and 6, there's some discrepancies with like the Luke and Leia part.
Yeah.
Where they're brother and sister, but we don't find that out until Jedi?
Officially, yeah.
Officially,
Officially,
Jedi?
yeah. You find out
And so,
Vader's his father in Empire, and then you find out Leia's his sister in Return of the Jedi.
Right.
Yeah.
So just one of those things that it seems like when you know that in Jedi, and then you go back and you watch A New Hope, that there's even in Empire Strikes Back, there's all this Luke and Leia and Han Solo like love triangle,
Mm-hmm.
and I always found that funny, and I'm sure obviously I'm not alone in that I mean what is seeing it as much as you have, is that just a glaring loophole that's okay because those 3 movies are great, or is there a way to make to not excuse it? What am I trying to say? Is there a way to say that makes sense?
Okay.
that he knew the whole time that they were brother and sister, but still did he just throw it in for the audience as a teaser? Or?
So, and it's always funny to think like, hey, he's like, I've always had this lineup for 3, 6, 9, 12, whatever movies. I think the problem with that is that people always took that to mean like the final end product is what he always had planned. He didn't. I mean, he started writing those movies in the early mid 70s, and the Jedi were called something completely different. The Force was called something completely different. Luke was not called Luke Skywalker. He was called Luke Starkiller. Yeah, I mean, just tons of stuff was different. I mean, what I think, he had like a general outline for the entire saga in his mind or on paper somewhere, but not every single beat was planned out. And in the original trilogy, the reason why there's inconsistencies is because, he's making the first one. He doesn't know if it's going to even get made because he had a lot of trouble from all the other creative people he was working with at the time. A lot of the crew at Pinewood in England, no one believed in what they were doing. They all thought it was just some rubbish sci-fi movie that they were making. Like no one understood what a Wookiee was or anything like that. So I mean, I think he had he had a basic outline for what he wanted the whole story to be, but it was always capable of being changed a little bit. And so things like Luke and Leia, in the first one, he's got a crush on her or whatever. In Empire, she gives him the kiss to make Han jealous or whatever. And then in the third one, it's like, oh, we're brother and sister, and I always knew we were brother and sister.
Right. Well, like when she's telling, so it's at the very end. It's at the very end of Jedi, and Harrison or Han Solo is like, I'll walk away, I'll do the thing.
Yeah.
And then she's like, he's my brother, silly, and like, that's it.
Yeah. Now, I mean, they try and explain it as, I mean, she says that when Luke tells her that she's his sister, she kind of has that obviously confused look on her face, but she's also kind of saying like, somehow I always knew. And I think what they meant by that was that their mutual infatuation or kind of like love for each other was a misunderstood love. They were obviously attracted to each other and they had a connection in some way, especially through the Force, but they didn't understand it. And so the most basic way of kind of explaining that to themselves in character, I guess, would say like, maybe they like each other or they should be together. In reality, you find out it's like, no, the reason why we're a bond, where we have that connection or that bond, is because we're actually Force twins and we're connected through the Force. And so that's why when she says, somehow I always knew, yeah, she's not saying like, yeah, I always knew I was about to hook up with my brother.
Okay.
That's not what I think that means. I think that she just always understood that feeling that she had for Luke and that Luke had for her, they misunderstood what it was, and then once it's finally revealed to them what it is, that kind of makes more sense now. I mean, that's the best way that I can explain.
No, and I've not heard that, and that is it's very basic, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That if you're George Lucas and you're like, well, yes, they're brother and sister, but they don't know, so they do have this connection, and you don't take it to where there's anything that goes too far. You know, where afterwards they're like, oh man, that was messed up. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, and not to say that, I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't make stuff up as he was going along. Like, I mean, just like any creative process, you make something. I mean, he made 3 separate movies over 6 years, 6 or 7 years or whatever. I mean, through the creative process, things are going to change. So yeah, when he makes the first one, he's got his core stuff. Then he develops new stuff in the second one, and in Return of the Jedi, he develops more stuff. So he's probably adding. He was clearly adding to the story as he went, but he had that main outline. So that's why, yeah. It's like, bro, why did you have them kiss in The Empire Strikes Back if they were brother and sister? And so, yeah, that's why it's always just, like, weird.
Okay. So that makes sense. Now, the other part is that it seemed like I think everybody really, really likes, and they're both really good movies as far as A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
I think they probably will stand out as the 2 best of all the 9 of them.
Mm-hmm.
But then it seemed like the first half, like anytime I've watched, and it's been years, but anytime I watch Return of the Jedi, I will fast forward through the first half of it, shuffle through or whatever the first half of it. But it seemed like with the Ewoks and things like that started to be more about being able to sell toys and maybe again that's just me not understanding the story, but it just seemed like that some of that it was just a little more commercial, I think, than what it was part of the plot or essential to the movie. Am I wrong in that?
I mean, George is a filmmaker and a marketing guy at the same time. I mean, he would probably say he's a filmmaker. I don't know what his opinion of himself on marketing things is, but he's doing 2 things at one time. He's trying to tell a story, but at the same time, he knows that he's going to make money by putting a bunch of teddy bears in the movie that kids are going to love, so he can sell toys. So that's what I think was going on there. Now, the funny thing was originally in Return of the Jedi, it wasn't supposed to be a planet full of Ewoks. It was supposed to be a planet full of Wookiees. Basically, they were going to go to Chewbacca's homeworld, and you'd meet a bunch of Chewbacca's, you'd meet a bunch of Wookiees, and which to a lot of people they're like, well, that would have made a lot more sense. It would be more believable to see a bunch of like 7-foot tall Wookiees pounding on the Emperor's best legion or whatever and defeating them. That makes sense. Instead, you get little like 3-foot tall Ewok teddy bears, and the Emperor's like, I'm sending my best legion down there, and they get punked by a bunch of teddy bears with like bows and arrows and stuff. You know, like what? So
and rocks that hurt them on their helmet.
On their helmets, stormtrooper armor that I don't know what it protects you from. Sunlight, I guess.
Being able to shoot accurately.
Yeah, people that shoot accurately and vitamin D intake. But yeah, the whole thing with that was like, I think it was because it's like I could probably sell more Ewok toys than I can sell Wookiee toys. Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, I have seen in interviews, whether you want to believe him or not, his whole thing was that he was taking things from history and from previous films that inspired him. And what he wanted people to understand was a lot of time great empires got toppled, not by other great empires, which obviously in history that does happen, but sometimes they got toppled by resistance, small resistance forces, or people that would, in 2020 hindsight, you look at them like, well, yeah, well, clearly they were in the right and they won. But at the time, you're like, they shouldn't have won. Like Dutch resistance in World War II against the Nazis. It's like, you've got this massive army that's just steamrolling through Europe, but you've got people in France and in the Netherlands and everything like that are mounting resistance. And I think that's kind of what he was trying to go with the Ewoks, was that it's like, you don't underestimate like the little guy. Okay. The little guy can topple a great thing. I think he was using that as like a little like subtle political statement. Okay. I mean, the same thing happens, in like Lord of the Rings. I mean, everyone underestimates the hobbits. They're these tiny little guys that it's like, I'm not afraid of them. They're not master warriors or anything like that. But in the end, what is the thing that saves the day? 2 hobbits. Right. I mean, everyone else helps them and distracts Sauron's armies and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it's Sam and Frodo tossing the ring into the mountain. There's the 2 of them going on their own journey for 2 out of the 3 books or whatever. And I think the same thing now, growing up, or now that I'm an adult, I see that in the Ewoks too. I still don't care for the Ewoks. I would have preferred, even as a kid, I would have preferred to have seen Wookiees probably, which I think is why he threw Wookiees in the prequel trilogy. One of the planets that they go to Kashyyyk, and Yoda's there, and there's a bunch of Wookiees fighting, and it's like you get that Wookiee fight scene that was supposed to be in Return of the Jedi instead.
But if you had the Wookiee planet instead of the Ewok planet, then you wouldn't have been able to do the Johnny Cochran Wookiee defense. So there's that. Look it up for those of you who don't know it.
The Chewbacca defense, actually.
I'm sorry, the Chewbacca specific defense. That's right. That's where you must acquit. Number 2, true or false? When you saw the little Ewok Gilberto get killed the first time, did you cry?
Oh yeah, I was a little kid. I mean, when that movie came out, I was 5 or 6 years old. I didn't get to watch it in the theaters, I don't think, so I saw it on TV or VHS or whatever. So yeah, I was a little 7 or 8 year old kid. When the little cute Ewok dies, I was like, oh, tears, sadness.
Yeah. So yeah, his little buddy Philippe.
Yeah, like, and then the other one's like, oh, what happened? Oh, you're dead, and then it cuts to other stuff.
But one Ewok casualty, that's not bad for an actor.
Yeah. You know? That's what the official tally at the end was: thousands of stormtroopers dead, 1 Ewok casualty.
Okay, so now moving on then to 1, 2, and 3.
The prequels. The prequels.
Now we waited in line for 2 days.
Yeah, 2 days. Yeah.
The maximum amount of time. I think we were like the 12th through 15th people in line.
Yeah.
Was that anticlimactic because of the first one? When you did you like the first one?
So the first time I watched it, the first time we saw The Phantom Menace, I was so pumped and hyped about the fact that there was a new Star Wars movie coming out. I'd been watching the trailers for months, and I was very excited. The first time I saw it, I was still excited after. I mean, I saw that movie a lot in the theater when it came out. I was so hungry for Star Wars that I again let things slide. The sand. Yeah, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. So there were things in that movie even the first time that I was watching it. Like the moment Jar Jar showed up, I was like, ugh. Like I didn't like Jar Jar from the first time I saw him.
Okay, so let's stop there. What is George's defense of Jar Jar? Is that just to make money, or did he think it was going to be a big hit, and did nobody tell him when they were screening it that this is just because everybody universally hated Jar Jar? Mm-hmm. And so to get that through, was that just him because he had complete control of it? Was that just him not listening? Have you heard anything about that?
So yeah, in the original trilogy, George didn't have 100% control over everything. He had a lot of control over everything. A lot of it was his stuff, but not everything was under his control. He still had masters that he had to obey, the studio execs and things like that. With the prequel trilogy, he was pretty much doing that all himself. So he was the man. He was the director. He was the writer. He was the producer. Rick McCallum was technically, I believe, the producer. But at the time, he was like, I'm going to do everything that I want to do the way that I want to do it. Because even with the original trilogy, he didn't get everything the way he wanted it to be. Not just because it wasn't all up to him, but also because of technical limitations at the time. So his whole thing was, after he had tested out some special effects stuff with the special editions of the original trilogy, The whole thing with the prequels was like, I'm going to push the technical boundaries just like I did with the originals. I'm going to come out with all these new special effects, and everything's going to be amazing, and everyone's going to love it. I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell, and no one's going to tell me otherwise. And if you watch like documentaries or behind the scenes stuff, unfortunately, George was surrounded by yes men at the time. Everyone that was there, including Rick McCallum, was there to just, yeah, George, yes, great. But you would also hear things like he would screen the movie for like Francis Ford Coppola or Steven Spielberg, and I guarantee you those guys were telling him like, hey, yeah, this is good, but even with it, I mean, those guys are his closest friends. Director, like in the business, those are probably his closest friends or whatever. They'd helped him multiple times. I still think that George was like, no, I don't care what anyone says. I don't care who it is or what they've done or how great they are. I'm making the movies that I want to make this time, and they're going to turn out the way I want them to be. And I think that's why the prequels are the way they are.
Was he thinking it was going to be like a C-3PO that like was just quirky and obviously I know the special effects of Jar Jar and having this character who was complete CGI for that was a big deal, and I'm sure he wanted that. But did he just think that it was going to be this like lovable C-3PO type character?
So yeah, I mean, I think his goal was he was trying to come up with that comic relief character that was like R2-D2 and C-3PO were in the original trilogy. And yes, Jar Jar's big thing was that he was this full CG character, first time that it ever happened. And again, if you look at behind the scenes stuff of the making of the Phantom Menace, George is like, just wait and see. Everyone's gonna love Jar Jar. This is gonna be like the greatest thing ever. Like he really believed that.
Okay.
And then
so it was just a little misguided, but he had the best of intention. Wasn't trying to sell toys.
I mean, I'm sure that. Well, the whole thing with the prequel trilogy is, I mean, he had his art department, everybody designed brand new stuff for everything. So yeah, they were still going to be selling toys, and that was the other thing too. Original trilogy Star Wars, the toys were a big deal. But they didn't make enough toys. So the reason why those old toys turned into collector's items was because there wasn't enough of them. And then also, I mean, when you were a kid, you weren't buying Star Wars toys to collect them. You were buying them to play with them.
Right.
So the people that didn't open the packaging and kept them, yeah, those things were worth money because there wasn't a lot of them, and they bought them as an investment potentially,
right.
Or maybe they just never opened them, and then, oh, cool, 20 years later, I got this thing that's worth a ton of money now. When the prequels came out, not only did George and his people like design brand new like creatures, spaceships, vehicles, everything, there were so many toys at the stores. And I remember like there would be like on the news, the nightly news, people in line at Target or whatever trying to buy Star Wars toys, and people like shoving people out of the way, like fights breaking out. Like people were trying to buy these toys thinking, oh well, they're Star Wars, they're going to be worth a ton of money.
Okay.
But the problem was that no, they're not going to be. It was like Beanie Babies. They made millions of those things. They're not going to be worth any money because there's so many,
right.
And everyone's buying them as collector's items. So you're going to have an oversaturated market. Those things are never going to be worth anything.
Right.
I've still got Phantom Menace toys. I didn't buy them.
Opened?
No, they're not open. I have Phantom Menace toys at home, still in their original packaging, but I don't even know why I have them. I didn't go and buy them to be collector's items. I think I got a bag of them from a friend who he bought them, and then he just had so many. He was like, hey, I know you like Star Wars. Do you want these? And I mean, here I am like in my 20s or 30s. I was like, yeah, sure, I guess. And they're still sitting in the same bag in my closet. They're not worth anything. I mean, they're at least not anything significant if they are worth anything, because they mass produced those prequel toys. So they were cool, but and I'm sure George Lucas made hundreds of millions of dollars off them. But yeah, that was a little bit different. And then back to like Jar Jar, yeah. I mean, I don't know if Jar Jar was. I don't think Jar Jar was made to sell toys. I think Jar Jar was made to push technical boundaries.
Okay.
I think Jar Jar was made to be like, hey, we're gonna make this CG character, and it's gonna be awesome.
So why is he so universally hated?
I don't know why. I mean, I can't tell you why or I shouldn't say everyone, because there are people that like his character.
Are there though?
Yeah, I mean, well, so here's the thing about that. Growing up as a kid, watching the original Star Wars trilogy, you grow up with it. So your youth and your nostalgia let a lot of things slide.
Okay.
And so when you get older, everyone's like, oh, the original trilogy is still the best or whatever. There are problems with the original trilogy. There are things that are not as good. But you let that go because you're looking at it through the foggy lens of your childhood. if you talk to people in their 20s now that grew up with the prequel trilogy, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I love the prequel trilogy. I love Jar Jar was awesome. I love Jar Jar because he's a character for kids." And that was the thing. When the prequel trilogy came out, you've got people like us that were in our early 20s, and then you've got people that were in their 30s and 40s that were adults when the original trilogy came out, and so they're all expecting like, now I'm going to get those Star Wars movies, and they're all going to be for me because I'm in my 20s to 40s or whatever. No, George is still making the same product. He's making a movie that appeals to everyone, especially kids. Kids are his core audience. So when everyone's like, why is there this dopey character Jar Jar like bumbling around being an idiot? As an adult, you don't let that slide because he's a stupid character. He's a buffoon, and he's not funny. He's not really that funny if you're an adult. But to kids, they think he's hilarious, and so they grow up liking him. Same thing's probably going to happen with the sequel trilogies that just came out. A lot of people are toxic about it and don't like what happened or the final product is. But I guarantee you, I mean, my friend's kid who's like 8 or 9, he loves them. He doesn't know any better. To him, those movies are amazing. Just like I thought the original trilogy was amazing. So he'll grow up 20 years from now and he'll think, yeah, I don't know why everyone hates the sequel trilogy. I thought they were awesome because he was watching it when he was like 8 years old. So yeah.
So what about George writing all 3 of those? Where even though you've said before when we were talking about this a couple weeks ago about doing this, like that he's a great world builder and a great storyteller. As far as creating all of these planets, all of these different races of characters and species. But as far as the screenwriting, I found that those 3 that it didn't flow. I thought he could have used a professional screenwriter. I don't know if you thought that at all.
I mean, yeah, like you said, I've always thought George was a great storyteller. He comes up with a great story and he's a great world builder. Dialogue is not his strength; it is his kryptonite. So I mean, there's always been famously like Mark Hamill or Harrison Ford has always been like, you can write this shit, but you sure as hell can't say it, or something to that effect. But yeah, I mean, he's not a great dialogue writer. I mean, the dialogue in the prequel trilogies is horrible. The dialogue in the original trilogy is not that much better either. But again, the fog of childhood and nostalgia lets you pass on that. But
it was also different.
But it was also different because there were other writers. I mean, there were other people that were contributing to the writing process. Like I believe the original trilogy, it's story by George Lucas on all of them. I'm pretty sure he wrote A New Hope. But then when you get to Empire, he is not the sole writer of Empire. And then he's not the director of Empire, and he's not the director of Return of the Jedi either. But then, yeah, when you get to The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, like I said, he's the director, writer, producer. He's everything. So everything that's going into those movies is his. Now, there are pros and cons to that. Looking at the entire saga now, the 3 separate trilogies, it's like you wish there was a good balance of everything, and the best balance of it is unfortunately in the original trilogy, I think. So in the prequels, you've got one guy doing everything. So again, there's a lot of great world building in there. He's got a lot of great content, but he's not a great people director either. So you get really wooden performances out of a lot of the actors. I love Natalie Portman. She's not great in those movies.
Right.
The only people that I mean, Ewan McGregor, even in the first one, it sounded like he just got out of the bar or something in some of his line readings. He ended up being like the best part of that prequel trilogy. Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan is great. But the only people that were really consistently good in those movies were people that were just like old character actors. You got Liam Neeson in the first one. He's great.
Right.
He shows up, just does what he's there to do. And you're like, yeah, man, it doesn't matter how bad the dialogue is. Liam Neeson knows how to say it, I guess. Ian McDiarmid, who plays the Emperor / the Chancellor or whatever, all his stuff is great. He's hamming it up. He's the villain, even though he's real subdued in the first couple of movies. But yeah, I mean, those guys are just old school character actors. They show up, and it doesn't matter how good or bad the dialogue is. They're there to do a job, and they do it. But when you get younger, inexperienced actors, at the time, Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen, even Ewan McGregor at the time in the first movie, yeah, it's just like real rough listening to them talk. I mean, they grew into it. By the end, Natalie was good by the third one, and then and then Ewan was great for most of it. The second and third one, he was good. Hayden, it was rough. I mean, a lot of people, and that's the thing with the prequel characters, like a lot of people hated on Jake Lloyd for young Anakin, a lot of people hated on Hayden for Anakin, and a lot of people hated on Ahmed Best, who voiced and did Jar Jar.
Yeah, can you imagine, like now with social media and the sewer that are the people who have nothing better to do than leave negative comments, but can you imagine what life would have been like for him? Because even
it was
one
pretty
actor
bad.
who, in this one.
Yeah. Kelly Marie Tran from, her character, Rose, showed up in The Last Jedi, and then she got just totally sidelined in the last movie in Rise of Skywalker. And I mean, that's a good example. I mean, she got a lot of hate on the internet to the point where she had to like get off social media.
People.
I mean, even with I mean, Jake Lloyd had a lot of personal problems. It didn't, and that's the thing. Social media is not the end all be all. Ahmed Best and Jake Lloyd had a lot of problems after the prequel movies were made.
Did they?
Jake Lloyd.
Well, I know. I recently heard about Jake Lloyd.
So Jake Lloyd was only in the first one.
Right.
He was little kid Anakin, like 10 years old or whatever. Problem for him was, unfortunately, kids at school. They'd make like Darth Vader noises or like lightsaber noises. They'd make fun of him because he was in StarArs and stuff like that. And he had a lot of he got like bullied a lot when he was a kid because of it. Ahmed Best, even though the internet was still relatively in its infancy back then. I mean, you still had message boards and you still had like fan mail and stuff like that. People used to rip up Ahmed Best all the time. And it was very well known that most people, not everyone, but most people disliked the character of Jar Jar Binks. And regardless of whether or not you think that's his fault or not, I don't think it's his fault. He did what he was told to do, and I think he did it great. It's just that character is really dopey. He's a buffoon character. He's likable, but also hateable at the same time. So, like, even though I didn't like Jar Jar, I didn't have a problem with Ahmed Best or anything like that. But there are a lot of people that don't. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have the ability to separate the two. And they're like, oh, no, dude, I hate you, your character. I mean, I'm not going to repeat things that people said, but I mean, people were really hateful towards him just because he was the one that portrayed the character.
I'm surprised.
He had like suicidal problems, I think.
I'm saying I'm surprised. I'm not feigning surprise, but I can't imagine. Although I can imagine that it sinks it even 20 years ago. But I guess maybe people have always done that. You know, like. I think your mom once hated, maybe it was my mom, somebody hated like some soap actor so much. Like
that's probably your mom. My mom hates Tom Cruise, like no matter what.
Oh.
My mom has no love for Tom Cruise movies. Like she hates Tom Cruise movies in general. I'm like, but a lot of the movies are good.
They're all good. Well, that's
a lot of them. I mean, there's bad ones, but most of them are good. She's like, I just hate it. And I have friends that like hate James Franco, or I have a friend that hates Anne Hathaway. Like some people just like don't like certain people, like they rub them the wrong way. And then they just can't handle that person. Not to say that I've never had that problem. I can't think of who I've never. Back in the day, I didn't like Leonardo DiCaprio. I didn't like him because I thought he was overrated. Growing up, because I always thought he was kind of doing the same thing in every movie. I mean, I know that he did well in certain movies. Everyone loved him in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which I actually didn't see. I still haven't seen.
But he was overrated.
But
that's a good opinion.
No, not that movie. I didn't say he was overrated in that movie.
Yeah.
I'm saying in other movies, like other movies that I saw him in. I always thought that he was fortunate enough to get to work with really talented people. Like he was working with Martin Scorsese all the time. And I'm like, well, yeah, all your movies are going to be good if they're Martin Scorsese movies for the most part, regardless of how good or bad you are.
Well, like in Romeo and Juliet, he seemed like he was talking with the same rhythm every time.
Yeah,
like it was
Claire Danes was the best part of that Romeo and Juliet movie. I thought she was great, but everyone was like teeny bopper in love with Leo at the time. When you're a good-looking guy like that, then yeah, you get a lot of like fans that are really all about you no matter what.
Leo, one good-looking guy to another. We've always been a fan of yours here at Long and Winded, so don't worry about the movie, man. It's just.
But. Yeah, like sometimes there's I have grown to like tolerate him in more recent movies. Like it just depends. Like,
okay.
All right. I guess we're not doing a Leo. We're not doing a Leo video. We're not doing a Leo video. But I don't hate Leonardo DiCaprio. FYI.
So you guys heard it. Hates Leo because he's attractive.
Don't hate.
So going into 7, 8, and 9. Now at this point, George has no creative input whatsoever. Correct? Or does because I
No,
believe once
that's pretty accurate.
once it was purchased, because they said, "Are you going to consult him?" I remember reading something, and they're like, "No, like of course we value, basically it was like almost like patronizing, like we value him, blah blah blah." But it's like this is Disney's thing now.
Oh yeah,
and
Disney was pretty much like
moving
thanks but no
forward.
thanks.
So what? Without any George influence, I shouldn't say direct George influence, is how I should phrase it. What did you think of 789?
As a whole, disappointing. Not in the same way that you might say that the prequel trilogy was disappointing. There's differences. From so when The Force Awakens came out, I think like Rotten Tomatoes had it like 80 something or high 80 something or low 90 something % like fan. I think it's like 88.
That's 7? Force Awakens?
Force Awakens
Okay.
is 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it goes.
Last Jedi is
Last
8,
Jedi.
and then Rise of Skywalker is 9.
Rise of Skywalker, okay.
So Force Awakens, I'm pretty sure that movie's sitting around 88% fan rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's accurate. When The Force Awakens came out, again, I was hungry for new Star Wars. Not as hungry as I was when The Phantom Menace came out, because Revenge of the Sith was like 2005 or 2006, I think. And then you're getting The Force Awakens. What was that? That was 15 or back in 2015, I think, or something like that. Anyway, I wasn't as hungry, but I was excited again, because the disappointment that I had felt with the prequel trilogy, I was like, yeah, George isn't involved anymore. Now I'm gonna get like great directors and great writers and all that. It's gonna be amazing. Oh, they're gonna do practical effects. They're not gonna do everything with green screens and CGI. This movie's gonna be amazing. And from a technical standpoint, I did like The Force Awakens very much. I liked the practical sets. They built things. People had things to interact with on screen. And I don't love J.J. Abrams, but I like J.J. Abrams' movies. I knew that he was a big Star Wars fan. He had done the Star Trek reboot.
Star Trek.
Star Trek reboot was fun. Mm-hmm. I couldn't handle the lens flare thing, but whatever. But I knew that JJ was a Star Wars fan watching that Star Trek reboot, because watching the Star Trek reboot, the thing that I don't think he got with that was that he was. I'm pretty sure the Star Trek reboot was a Star Wars audition tape for him, because when you watch that Star Trek reboot, it doesn't feel like a Star Trek movie. It feels like a Star Wars movie. It's all like action and it was made to appeal to a mass audience. That's the thing. Star Trek was always a little bit more niche.
Right.
It didn't have as much broad appeal as Star Wars did, and I think that's what he was trying to do with Star Trek reboot, which he did. A lot of people went and saw it. It made good money, and I had fun with the movie. There were plot holes, whatever, but I felt like that movie was an audition tape for Star Wars. So when he got The Force Awakens, I was like, here we go. Now it's going to happen. Now he's going to make what's in his wheelhouse, and this is going to be awesome. And despite the fact that The Force Awakens was essentially a remake of A New Hope with elements of Empire and Return of the Jedi mixed in as well, I was like, it's okay. I thought that they needed that.
But did they, could they not have taken it somewhere else? Because what were we talking about earlier when you said it's kind of, they're based like Back to the Future trilogies, how it's the same thing. Like when I'm watching 7, 8, and 9, I'm thinking like, oh, like Rey is just Luke, and then this is all, it all just, and it's like daddy issues again and stuff. It just seemed like they had anywhere that they could have taken it, and it's what I would have expected George to kind of like revert back to if he was in control.
Yeah.
And
so love it or hate it, the prequels did do something different, whether you like it or not. There's a lot of like Trade Federation and political stuff.
Yes.
And it's like, okay,
God,
cool, let's go watch C-Span for 2 hours. This is awesome. Jedi C-Span, this is good times. Like I said, love it or hate it, he was doing different stuff in those movies. They still followed the basic hero's journey like he had always done, like he had done with the original trilogy. And the same thing applies to the sequel trilogy, hero's journey again for Rey. But you're right, when you watch The Force Awakens, you're like, man, this is basically just A New Hope with a new paint job on it. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I thought that was it. There were people that didn't like that, but a majority, I think, of people liked it. Hence, it had good reviews and a lot of it made a ton of money. People wanted to go see it. I think Star Wars needed that at the time as a palate cleanser for what everyone recently remembered with the prequels, where it's like, yeah, there was a lot of bureaucracy, trade federations, and all that stuff, Jar Jar. and bad dialogue. I want there to be a fresh start for Star Wars, but we're going to use what worked in the original one to get people back on board again. And so that's why I was okay with that in The Force Awakens. And I enjoyed that movie. Moving forward after that, my thought was always, as a fan, it's cool that they kind of just redid A New Hope with Force Awakens, but I don't want to see The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi with these next two movies. I want to see something, a different kind of storyline or whatever. And love it or hate it again, when you get Rian Johnson's Last Jedi, which personally I do not like that movie. He did try and do a lot of stuff. He tried to do a lot of stuff, but
he introduced gas, fuel.
Yeah,
that was kind of cool. Yeah. I mean, so hey, we can't
Liquid Schwartz got they brought Liquid Schwartz into it, and people were running out of gas, and we got a 2.5 hour gas chase movie, and like I said, I don't care for The Last Jedi, not just as a Star Wars movie. I just don't think it's a good movie in general. And I was kind of hard on Rian Johnson because he was kind of like 0 for 2 with me, I think. I didn't care. A lot of people love Looper, which I don't like Looper that much either. I think the time travel in that movie is ridiculous. It doesn't make any logical sense at all. And it was a cool concept, but I don't think it was a good movie either.
He's him. So.
Yeah, no, I got that. And then the same thing with Last Jedi. I was like, The Last Jedi was the first time I ever saw a Star Wars movie in the theaters where I was not excited to ever see the movie again.
Did you only see it once?
I saw it twice in the theater, but that is only because I had already purchased my ticket for my second screening before I saw it the first time.
And did you like it any better the second time?
No. Prequel trilogy, people always laugh about how not great they are. I saw Phantom Menace 11 times in the theater. I saw Attack of the Clones 11 times in the theater. And I saw Revenge of the Sith, which is the best out of those three, only 8 times in the theater. I had a friend that saw Phantom Menace 15 times in the theater, I think.
I saw Evita 8 times.
You saw Evita 8 times in the theater.
So
yes.
each his own, right?
Exactly. I only saw Evita 4 times. We're cool. Anyway, when Force Awakens came out, I think I saw Force Awakens 6 times in the theater.
Okay.
I think. And then Last Jedi came out. I was like, yeah, here we go, more Star Wars. Here it comes. Trailers looked awesome. Visually, the movie looked like it was going to be good.
Yes.
And that's the thing. The beauty of the sequel trilogy is that they look really good, even if they're not as good. And so Last Jedi comes out. I went with my cousin, I believe, to go see it. He's a big Star Wars fan. And so I personally am sitting through that entire movie just slowly building up more and more disappointment. I was like, this is really where this movie's going. Then they go to Canto Bight, and I was like, did they learn nothing from the prequels? This is something that I would expect to see in the prequel movies. This whole sequence is ridiculous. Oh,
where's that? What's that?
That's the casino planet.
Oh,
and then they got the dog horses, and I'm like, is this like a PETA thing? What's going on? Oh, I mean, I feel bad for animals sometimes too, but I was like, is this what this movie is about? And meanwhile, they got the gas chase going on the main plot line, and Rey is learning how to become a Jedi at the same time. So this car chase that's happening, this gas chase that's happening, is happening over the course. I think they set a time frame, we're gonna run out of fuel in 16 hours or something like that. So I was like, okay. So Rey finds Luke and goes through her 2.5 training lessons with the Jedi Master in 16 hours. And then shows up and is moving planets around and stuff like that. Whereas, in the original trilogy, Luke goes and trains with Yoda, and you're like, well, how much training does Luke get from Yoda? And you're like, you don't know. They don't set a time frame.
Right.
You can say, well, Han and Leia and Chewie and all them on the Millennium Falcon go to Cloud City after they fly through the asteroid field and everything and get away from the Empire, but you don't know how long that takes because they don't have a hyperdrive.
Right.
So they got to fly at normal speed. So for all we know, they could have been cruising for months. It could have taken them months to travel through space to get to Bespin or whatever. So potentially Luke is training with Yoda. Again, I'm not saying that you should become a Jedi Master in a few months. What is it, mastering something is 10,000 hours or something like that.
Yes.
So whether you're getting trained by the greatest Jedi Master or not, I mean, Luke got a lot more training out of Yoda than Luke gave to Rey, but Rey is showing up doing miraculous stuff. It's just ridiculous. And so, in The Last Jedi, yeah, I'm sitting there and I'm just like getting more and more disappointed as the movie goes, and then it ends, and I'm like, okay. And so my cousin and I are walking out.
So why does everybody hate the girl?
I don't hate.
No, I know you don't. But why was everybody hating on her? Why did I don't understand why she had to delete her stuff?
So Rey. So here's the thing with Rey. Daisy Ridley does a great job.
No, I'm sorry, not her. The one.
Oh, Kelly Marie Tran.
Right. Why does everybody hate
Rose?
Yes.
So Rose's thing. So she's brought on as a new character, which that happens. Sure. Lando shows up in The Empire Strikes Back, and then he's a big part in Return of the Jedi. So it's not like, oh, they brought on a new character, that's why I hate this character. A lot of people, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure there's some kind of racism going on there because people were harping on her because she was Asian. So, but more to the, I mean, if you want to look at it from like the movie standpoint, right. I think a lot of people were harping on her because her character is tied to like the worst part of the movie. She takes Finn on a side quest that ends up not being important.
Okay.
And they go to like this total waste of time planet where Rian Johnson's trying to make his commentary on rich people are bad and treating animals bad is bad. And it's like, yeah, I know, I get it, man. and the only drop of wisdom that you really get from that Benicio del Toro's character makes is that all those rich people, they're all arms dealers, which is like, oh, bad. But then you find out those guys sell arms to the First Order and to the Resistance. So those people make their money off both sides. Right. And it's like, yeah, they're making a profit. I guess they're bad. You guys are the ones perpetuating this stuff. I mean, obviously the Resistance is standing up to like the fascism or whatever the First Order stands for. But yeah, you guys are the ones that make these guys rich. You got good guys buying weapons off the same guys that the bad guys buy weapons off of. But anyway, that whole storyline was just like unnecessary, and it was just like point. And then it ends up being pointless because what they do doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Like none of the stuff matters. And then more to the point with Rose's character, again, they're trying to get the whole like love conquers all thing across, and so you've got this great moment where Finn, like they're gonna lose the battle at the mining facility or whatever. They're going to lose that battle and they're all hunkered up behind the big door or whatever, and they got that giant cannon that's going to shoot through, and they're losing, and Finn's like, if I just kamikaze this thing right into it, I can blow it up and save all my friends. Right. And you're like, oh dude, is he actually gonna, like, that was the one moment in the movie where I thought there was going to be some redemption for the movie. I was like, dude, if they kill a major character this and he sacrifices himself, that'll be amazing. And then what happens? Boom! Rose sideswipes him, which doesn't make any logical sense because everyone's running away. He turns around and goes in a straight line while they're all going the opposite direction, and somehow she does like this big curve loop and sideswipes him. It doesn't make any sense, but still, he's like, "Why did you do that? Why did you do that? I was gonna save everyone." And she's like, because that's like not how we defeat them. We defeat them like, I don't remember what she says. Like, but she's like, should we defeat them with love or something? and then they're trying to, and then she's like, I think she kisses him or something like that. And you're like, is that what's going on? Like, what just happened? And then sure enough, the big super laser blows a hole open in the door, and I'm like, well, all your buddies are dead now, but that's cool that you two made it. Right. You two are all right for now until they walk over you and shoot you dead. So it was just bad, and I think that's why she got a lot of hate. Okay, was just because her character was part of a completely pointless subplot, and in a movie that was disappointing. That was disappointing. Coming off the heels of and then unfortunately. The thing was, I liked her as an actress. I thought she played the part well. No, I thought she was interesting. And her 6 lines in the last one were fine. Oh gosh, and the Rise of Skywalker, it was just horrible what happened to her. So why is it called the Rise of Skywalker? Are we saying that Rey is Skywalker now? Well, that was the thing at the end of the movie. Did you see it? I forget. Yes. Okay. So at the end of the movie, she takes the name Skywalker. You find out in the movie that she's actually a descendant of the Emperor Palpatine.
Right.
But
people are upset about that. Like something that came out later.
There was something recently that came out. The book. It was the novelization. So the novelization for The Rise of Skywalker came out.
This is after the movie.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's usually always going to be a novelization, or there always has been novelizations, and the novels pretty much have the exact same stuff that the movie does, with a few little extra tidbits. Like I remember the original trilogy. Reading the novelizations for those. I think A New Hope is pretty much, the book is almost exactly the same. I think Empire is almost exactly the same. The only one of the original trilogies where the novelization has a little bit of extra detail in it is Return of the Jedi. And I don't remember because it's been like 20 years since I read that book. But I think there's like stuff that Obi-Wan tells Luke after Yoda dies.
Okay.
Like he gives him a little bit more exposition. You find out a little bit more information about Anakin / Darth Vader or something like that. But anyway, so Rise of Skywalker novelization. Apparently, so in the movie, it's discovered that Rey is the Emperor's granddaughter. Now, a lot of I don't really care about this, but a lot of people were like, wait, so the Emperor was getting busy? Like, at what point was Palpatine, like, having sex? Like,
with whom?
With whom, yeah. And so, I guess in the novelization, it's you find out that, and I haven't read it, I just heard this, that he had been trying unsuccessfully for years to clone himself.
Okay.
So that he could essentially have his own form of immortality. He could always just clone a younger version of himself, and then when his body becomes old, decrepit by the dark side or whatever, he just transfers himself into the clone. The problem was that all these clones that he kept making were failures. They had no connection to the Force.
Happened to Michael Keaton in Multiplicity.
So he couldn't ever transfer himself into any of these clones because none of them had a connection to the Force. So he would either discard them or destroy them or whatever. But apparently one of his failed clones, again, I don't know for sure how this happened, but one of his failed clones, he gave 0 Fs about it and just, I don't know, he let it go, didn't kill it, didn't destroy it. That clone went on and lived a life or whatever, met a woman, had sex, and Rey was the result. And so, so
she is.
So Rey is. Rey is. She's in the movie. Like I said, they describe her as his granddaughter. But if you look at it from a different point of view, she's actually his daughter. She's his daughter and his granddaughter. So his clone is like his son, but then she's the daughter of his clone,
but
so she's his daughter.
Didn't they show like a flashback, like them having to have her family leave because her family were like somebody important? So was her
that was the thing. So her dad and mom, they were trying to hide themselves from Palpatine, and I think it was, I can't remember now because I haven't seen Rise of Skywalker since it came out.
Okay.
I think that what they said was that like Luke helped them hide her or something like that, because that was the other big stupid drop, was that apparently Luke and Leia knew the whole time who Rey was, even though they
seriously?
Okay.
I'm officially no. Okay, so rapid fire. I'm officially. I don't know. I'm not out. But so
I will say that. So the sequels, you asked this earlier. The sequels about Marvel movies. Marvel movies are all great, even though they're all very vanilla, because they're all like, it's the same movie over and over again. They follow a formula and they stick with it, but those movies are successful because the formula is good.
Right.
Star Wars, the sequel trilogy's problem was that it didn't have one person's vision or story.
It's more like X-Men than what it is like the Marvel. Like, it's kind of all over the place.
It's all over the
place. Can't really find.
So you got JJ who makes The Force Awakens and does what he's going to do in that movie. And instead of there being a plot outline for 3 movies like Disney probably should have done,
right?
They said, JJ, make a movie. Yes. Ryan, make a movie. And Colin Trevorrow, make a movie. He was who was supposed to originally direct Episode 9. So with JJ decides to make a New Hope clone. Ryan decides to go off the rails and just say, yeah, all that stuff that JJ set up, who cares? I'm going to do my own movie. This is my movie. I'm going to make my own stuff. So he just like pushed all that stuff that people thought was important to the side, and he makes his own thing, which didn't do as great. And then Colin Trevorrow gets fired by Disney because of other stuff with Fantastic Four. And they're like, what are we going to do now? Last Jedi's not making nearly as much money as Force Awakens did. It's got horrible reviews. People are comparing it to like the prequel trilogy and stuff like that. There are people that love it because it did do new things. I am not among them. I do not like that movie for multiple reasons. But Disney had to figure out, like, what are we going to do? Well, let's go back to the guy that made the movie that everyone did like, kind of. And so they bring JJ on board to try and fix it. And so then you get The Rise of Skywalker, which ends up being he's trying to like fix... So the reason why the sequel trilogy to me is a disappointment is because you've got 3 movies that don't feel cohesive, and because in the end, your third movie, which is supposed to be wrapping up a 3-movie trilogy and a 9-film saga, isn't doing that. It's trying to
because there's so much that's out there.
There's so much that's trying to fix from the previous movie that you're like, oh, by the way, the Emperor's back. Oh, by the way, remember how we told you Rey's nobody? Psych! Rey is the Emperor's granddaughter. And here's Lando, who shows he's cool. Lando shows up with like 100,000 ships or whatever because he's cool.
So why can Disney with Marvel do such a good job with the continuity, but why did they not? Why were they
Kevin Feige's in charge of Marvel movies. So he's the unifying vision and control over that entire universe. And in his case, he has a good plan. Again, it doesn't always work. George Lucas had full control over everything for the prequel trilogy, and those didn't turn out great. So, I mean, they got lucky. They got a creative person who knew how to make mass appealing movies to Marvel, and he knew how to adapt storylines from the comics that people would like and make good movies out of. With Star Wars, I do believe that there was 1 or 2 people out there that they could have brought on to oversee the Star Wars trilogy, the sequel trilogy, and still give directing jobs to different people if they wanted to. And they say, just like how, because that's the other thing with Marvel movies, you see a Marvel movie director gets announced, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy's gonna be cool. And then like a few months later, you hear, oh, such and such got fired, such and such is taken over. And it's always because the director came in thinking, I'm the director, I'm gonna make the movie I want to make. And Disney's like, no. This is Kevin's thing, this is what we're doing, this is what you guys are gonna do. You get a little bit of leeway, but you got to you got to hit point A, B, C, and stick the landing.
So that's going to work until it doesn't.
And they're going to keep printing money until that doesn't print money anymore.
So,
and with Disney, they didn't do, or with Star Wars, they didn't do that. I think that if they had gotten somebody like either Jon Favreau, I mean, now with the success of The Mandalorian, I think if they had gotten somebody like either Jon Favreau or even better, Dave Filoni, who worked on the animated stuff, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and Star Wars Rebels, if they had given someone like him creative control, like a Kevin Feige, I always don't know how you say his last name. I think that's how you say his last name, but Feige. If they had given Filoni the same type of control over everything, and did that, and had him develop a 3-film story treatment. Like, this is what needs to be done in these 3 movies. Okay. This is the story.
It's storyboarded out.
This is the storyboarded movie for 3 movies. JJ direct that one. Ryan direct that one. Colin direct that one. If those people are on board with it, then they do it. And
it's one 3-part movie.
Yeah, it's one 3-part movie. Yeah. And I think that's what the sequel trilogy was missing. Like, everything else was good. All the acting was great. The special effects and practical effects were all top notch. They're all great. I think they'll age very well. 20 years from now, they won't. I don't think these movies will look any. I don't think they'll look.
No, I think you can still watch. I think you still watch A New Hope.
But New Hope's got like updated special effects in it. But a lot of it still looks good. But then there's also been like touch-ups over the years. But like with the prequel trilogy, with the prequel trilogy, some of those special effects are not aging well. They look like special effects from 20 years ago now. And it's because those were not all practical effects. A lot of it was based on CG. The reason why things like Jurassic Park still look good and Terminator 2, well, Terminator 2 to a lesser extent. I mean, it still looks great, but my point, Jurassic Park still looks great because everyone thinks that, oh, those are all like CG dinosaurs. Not really. A lot of it was practical. Like that T-Rex was a giant T-Rex model, and that's why, and they shot it in dark light with rain actually raining on the model or on the big giant T-Rex, and that's why it still looks good because it was physically there.
Right.
The prequel trilogy is starting to show its age because all the clone troopers and all the aliens floating around in the background, they look like things that were CG animated.
They look like little Titanic people when they're walking on the boat.
Yeah, they look like something that was animated 20 years ago. So yeah.
So real quick to finish up, in 20, 25 years, you said 20 years from now, yes, the quality of the movies will hold up. The way that people are now with Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in 25 years from now, do you think Marvel will have supplanted the 9, or even if you include the solo story and the other types of offshoots, do you think that Marvel will have supplanted the Star Wars universe as the preeminent one?
I mean, it's a good question. My thought on that would be no.
Okay.
I don't. So the Marvel movies are great. I've loved all of them. I think. I don't think there's one that I haven't liked.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with Thor: The Dark World. A lot of people do. I mean, it's not. I will say that there are Marvel movies that are better than others. Yes, some of them are great. Some of them are not so great. The Dark World is not great. I guess like Iron Man 2 and 3, I hate those. I don't like either one of those movies.
Ben Kingsley, yeah, it was a tough one.
But anyway, so 20 years from now, so it's about cultural impact. I think the Marvel universe will be relevant and will be a powerful thing 25 years from now because of what it accomplished. I think it told a massive story over like 15 or 20 movies, something that no one had ever done before. So for that reason, those movies will be well liked and well remembered. And again, you're going to have all the people that are kids right now growing up loving those movies. I mean, I love these movies as an adult. I'm 42 years old now, and I love those movies. So I know a kid that's growing up right now is going to love those movies 25 years from now. So I think that yes, 20 years from now, everyone's going to be like, oh, why can't movies be made like the Marvel movies were made 20 years ago? Right. And it'll be like that. I do think
that. But you don't think it'll supplant?
I don't think it'll supplant Star Wars just because Star Wars has got such a foothold and because Marvel movies and a lot of other movies owe so much to the Star Wars movies themselves. The original trilogy, that's the thing. It's the original trilogy. The original trilogy is so firmly ingrained that until everyone drops dead of old age, it's going to be strong for a long time, I think.
Okay.
And what the prequels and the sequel trilogies do is it allows younger generations to fall in love with Star Wars and then also appreciate the original trilogy. So even though kids growing up right now on the sequel trilogy, those will probably be the ones that they love the most. They'll still be able to like also love the other movies, and then you'll get people like us that'll keep getting older,
right?
And we'll still love the original trilogy, and we'll have the things that we like and dislike about the other movies. So yeah, I don't think it'll supplant them, just because Star Wars was just such a huge, like I said, cultural impact on the way genre films were made.
That's blockbusters. It was the first of what it did. Okay, so last question. If the saga of Star Wars was 10 movies instead of 9, and the 10th movie was Spaceballs, where does it rank in terms of the best of the 10?
Where does Spaceballs fall? It's probably going to be in the. It's probably going to be. It's probably going to be in the top. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. It'll be in the middle.
Right. So 3 or 4. Movie that's it. So, no, great movie. We do a whole thing on that.
Well, that's like the joke that I've heard more recently was one of the best Star Trek movies ever made is Galaxy Quest.
Oh yes, absolutely. We need to watch that. The documentary.
Yes,
on that
I haven't seen that yet.
So have I. We need to say that. That's funny. It was Galaxy Quest. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll appreciate your time. It's the Movie Man. We will be back with some more fun stuff to talk about. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.